welcome on stage Fahad Abdulkareem, Executive Vice President for Producing, Aramco. Omar Nasri, Chief Executive Officer, ADNOC Onshore. Guido Brusco, Chief Operating Officer, Natural Resources, Eni. Cederic Cremers, Executive Vice President, LNG, Shell. Meg Gentle, Executive Director, HIF Global. John Gibbs, President, ExxonMobil Global Projects Company. Moderator, Renée van Heusden, Head, Oil and Gas Industry, World Economic Forum.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all in very good numbers. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and welcome to the panel on decarbonization at scale, pathways to net zero in the energy sector. My name is Renée van Heusden. I'm the head of oil and gas at the World Economic Forum, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. It's my honor to join the Baker Hughes annual meeting here in Florence, and a big thank you also to Mr. Lorenzo Simonelli for hosting us for this phenomenal event with you all. We have a packed agenda and we have a fantastic cast, so allow me, before I share a bit of contextual remarks, to briefly introduce our wonderful cast for today. I'll start at my far end with Mr. Fahad Abdulkareem, who is the Executive Vice President of Producing at Aramco. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Next to Fahad, we have Mr. Omar Nasri, who is the CEO at ADNOC Onshore. Welcome, good morning. Then from Italy, not too far from home, we have Mr. Guido Brusco, who's the COO Natural Resources at Eni.
Thank you.
Then, good morning and welcome. We have Cederic Cremers, who is the Executive Vice President at LNG Shell and LNGC board member. Then we have Meg Gentle, lovely to have you here, Executive Director at HIF Global. And then finally, John Gibbs, President of Global Projects at ExxonMobil Corporation. Welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining. So actually, I have just returned from our own annual meeting in Davos in Switzerland as the World Economic Forum. And frankly, energy continues to be central stage of the debate. And in many discussions, whether it was private or on stage, it was a key topic. Whether it's about economic prosperity, or it's the race for AI and new energy demand centers that are growing up, or, of course, as we're going to discuss today, meeting the climate challenge, energy is really central to all these discussions. What was also interesting to witness is that we see an increasing understanding of the complexity of the energy system and really how it plays a role in the energy trilemma, where we need to meet energy not only in a clean way, but also secure and an affordable way. And as such, the sector is transforming rapidly, and we have a fantastic crew today to discuss how that is taking shape. Because this transition is really multifaceted. It's not only bold innovation that you have seen in the hall this morning, and also that all these companies are driving, but it's also collaboration across stakeholders, as Lorenzo just shared on stage in the opening remarks. And in line with the topic of today, it requires scale. So new technologies and strategies need to be scalable in order to meet the ever-growing energy demand that we see across the globe in different regions. And industry that you all represent is really critical in the success of its delivery. So the questions that this panel will unpack, it's really to focus on these industrial strategies that have to balance to keep the momentum of the transition, to even accelerate where possible, whilst we need to meet the growing energy demand globally. So as we kick off this panel, what we will do, we will open it up with individual questions for each cast, then have a conversation along the panel focused themes, and we'll end the question with our lens towards hope. What do we hope for this year? So we have a lot of ground to cover, so let me kick it off. And Fahad, again, welcome and thank you for joining. Aramco, as one of the largest energy companies on the planet, has a perspective really along the energy value system. So to kick us off this morning, could you kindly share your views on some of these systemic shifts that you think are needed to accelerate the decarbonization that we see in the sector? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Renée, and thanks to Baker Hughes for the opportunity to be with esteemed panelists discussing this very important topic. Well, I think in your question, there is an embedded question that came ahead of it, which is, do we need to have a systemic change in our views of decarbonization plan? And I think the answer is yes. The second question is, what are these systemic changes? And I believe the systemic changes that we should adopt is looking equally at the three important elements. One is the affordability, the energy economy, the security of supply, as well as the decarbonization and the sustainability. The three elements on the three pillars has to be considered as a package in order for us, in a balanced way, in order for us to achieve a sustainable, big footsteps towards our decarbonization targets. Having to have these elements together balanced, we will be having a balanced energy supply globally and regionally into certain specific regions, as well as have the right energy economics for between the suppliers and the consumers. Recent attempts and plans have been, in some areas, focusing into one element or two elements on the account of the others, and accordingly, what we had seen is challenges facing us, and accordingly, some companies or maybe countries have started to pull away from the plan. Others, leading ones, had been shifting towards significant coal options or carbon-emitting options as they had faced energy security matters in their plans accordingly. And I think collectively, collaboratively, having to consider these pillars equally into our views, we will have a steady, big improvement into our decarbonization targets. Back to Aramco, I think Aramco had been considering these three elements decades ago, many decades ago, more than 5 decades ago, and technology were considered in their plans, evolving technologies on the subsurface, on the reservoir management, reservoir modeling, efficiency into our withdrawal plans, facility services, master gas system, flare minimization, flare recovery. That had made us achieving the three pillars results with a great output. We are one of the lowest upstream carbon intensity in the world, if not the lowest. We are the lowest producer costs, as well as we are the most reliable energy supplier in the oil and gas industry. And I believe having that focus would make us all collectively reaching great steps forward.
Thank you, Fahad. Balance, it's a balancing act, this transition. So maybe turning to ADNOC and Omar, thank you so much for joining. This balancing act, one of the components is really how to make your own internal operations more sustainable. So really the scope one of the emissions footprint. So could you share a bit more how ADNOC, as for example, a key driver of the oil and gas decarbonization charter that was launched only in Dubai, what is the sector doing to ensure its own operations become more sustainable from your perspective?
I think the opening of Lorenzo made it easier for me because it's mainly leveraging our own expertise in collaborative with strategic partners in energy, in, of course, technology and finance, and with academia, leveraging all of these. And we pride ourselves also being as one of the most cost-effective, least carbon-intensive barrel in the industry. And just to give you a few examples of how ADNOC is pioneering, we have pioneered the first carbon capture plant from a hard-to-abate steel plant through our Riyadh plant. We've also, this year, have announced that our Shah oil field have achieved 0.1 kilogram of CO2 per barrel of oil equivalent. That's a benchmark for the industry. And we have done it through prioritization on electrification and also by multiple innovative ideas. Also, when it comes to leveraging our digitization and AI solutions toward our mature assets, we saw a breakthrough in the work process in making sure that we take the right action at the right time in order to extend the life cycle of the asset. And that helped us put more opportunities in leveraging AI, and with the support of AIQ and multiple partners, we are able to introduce AI even to our subsurface level, all the way to surface level. And that helps us unlock so many opportunities in maintaining our lead in being the most cost-effective and lowest carbon-intensive in the industry.
Fantastic. Congratulations, fantastic. Guido, so I touched upon this concept of the energy trilemma. Annie has been driving how to strategically put this in place. So it's about balancing economic growth, but also climate commitments and an inclusive transition. And sometimes there's a bit of debate of what does this mean, inclusive transition. Could you share some of how Annie is driving this energy trilemma from a strategic point of view in your operations?
Thank you, Renée. So I totally agree with you. So the main challenge today is to find the right balance and timing between the traditional and the renewable and the new energies, while making sure that we can have secure, reliable, and affordable energy, but at the same time we address also the energy poverty. Let's remind that more than 700 million people in Africa still lacks of energy. So we believe that the hydrocarbon demand will still be substantial in the forthcoming years, and gas will play a pivotal role. As E&I, we have plans to increase our energy mix on gas by 60% by 2030 and 90% by 2050. Gas is has the lowest carbon footprint. It's flexible and can complement the intermittency of the renewable energy. And thanks to the advanced technology today, we lowest the cost of liquefaction, and we lowest also the cost of transportation, and we made gas a global commodity in the world. Again, as E&I, we are focusing on low carbon and high value projects, namely Indonesia, Mozambique, Cyprus soon, but also we are monetizing non-associated gas in Congo to reduce flaring and increase our efficiency and lower our carbon footprint, but also in Baleine, in Ivory Coast, delivering all this gas to the domestic power. So, in conclusion, the transition is inevitable, but must be pursued in a more pragmatic and realistic way. And I think that today we found the right balance, and we left the ideology, and we are looking more to a technological approach.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Yes, the transition is inevitable. The big question is when? So 2050 has become this token deadline, but is that really feasible, and how can we actually implement at scale and fast? And gas has a critical role to play. I'm sure, Cederic, you don't necessarily disagree with that as the EVP for LNG. So maybe under Wael Sawan's leadership, Shell has been about focus. Where can that impact on that energy trilemma be the biggest? So building on what you just heard from your colleagues, how is Shell looking at balancing this energy trilemma in its strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. And first of all, it's an honor to be here with my other co-panelists, and also want to thank Lorenzo and the whole Baker Hughes team for once again putting on an excellent event for us, and also organizing the great weather here in Florence. So I think just a couple of things I want to touch on. As we look at the energy transition, and a few of the words that we just used is a sustainable energy transition and a just energy transition. And the word sustainable, we often believe that there is, maybe a tension. There is to some degree a dilemma between those elements or the trilemma. But I also think that at the end of the day, they point in the same direction, because it's not profits or decarbonization. Because ultimately, for any new, and I'll use Lorenzo's word of ecosystem, for any new ecosystem in the energy industry to be sustainable in the future, we have to make sure that it is also profitable, and that investment actually generates a return. Right. And not just in the generation of the energy, but in the entire value chain, so that the infrastructure is lined up for it to actually handle these new energy sources and ultimately bring them to the customers in a competitive way. So really important to also consider that sustainability also considers, at the end of the day, affordability and that economic sustainability. I think the other one is you said inclusive or a just energy transition. My simple definition of it is making sure that there is a fairer distribution of the costs and benefits of the energy transition. And clearly, you know, the geopolitical tensions between the North and the South play a big part in that. In our company, when we talk about just energy transition, we focus in particular on 4 groups. You know, our workforce and how the energy transition impacts them, communities, suppliers, and ultimately also our customers. And I just want to touch on one last thing. I mean, Guido already talked about the critical role of gas. Of course, you know, you won't hear me arguing against that as the head of LNG. But I do think it's important that as an industry we start shifting our view of gas. And that as we move forward, that we don't just talk about natural gas when we say gas is a destination fuel, etc., but that ultimately it's about providing a gaseous molecule, high energy density solution to customers. And that over time, what the actual composition of that gaseous molecule is will shift from being primarily fossil-based right now to including also bio and synthetic and other, you know, decarbonization options like CCS, etc. And ultimately, you know, maybe into fully defossilizing that. But at the end of the day, it's the same business, it's the same strength as an industry that many people here in the room bring that will be just as applicable, you know, as it is today in a pure natural gas source. So,
fantastic.
Thanks,
Thanks for sharing that. And it's actually a fantastic segue to Mac from HIF Global. So we're pivoting a bit towards the role of fuels, and particularly in one sector. And HIF Global has been really a leader in e-fuels, so I would love to hear from you a bit on how are you working on scaling these new solutions literally on a daily basis. So for you, this is definitely in your comfort zone. And could you share with the audience what do you think is really needed to scale e-fuels today? And particularly, let's delve into the transportation sector as a key example of demand region.
Thank you, Renee. And actually, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Baker Hughes for really providing the environment and the pioneering technology innovation that we need the industry to be able to move to. We couldn't move to some of those places without the technology being in place first. And second, maybe I'll take a minute to say, you know, what are e-fuels and just remind everyone. E-fuels are hydrocarbons that are made from green hydrogen and recycled carbon dioxide. And they can be used in existing infrastructure, so move directly into the market today. We produce e-fuels in southern Chile, so we know it can be done. It's not a technology question to get to scale. It's a market question. And to support the market to grow, we really need 2 things. One is regulation that is certain. So not so much regulation that is supporting, but just regulation that is certain and enables us to grow carbon markets that put a value on every carbon molecule of CO2 abated. And second is still cost reduction. We know that we face the competitiveness of the biofuels market. We have to get to the level of biofuels pricing on a dollars per ton of CO2 abated level. And we'll talk a little bit about technology cost reduction, but this is where we are relentlessly going after in the design of the scaled up plants, is everything that we can do on cost reduction to bring fuels into the market. And I would say that we have a tremendous opportunity in 2025 because that regulation certainty on a dollars per ton of CO2 abated on a global level is currently being debated for implementation with the International Maritime Organization. And that will maybe be the first comprehensive carbon policy that will not be regional, but will actually be global.
Fantastic. We'll come back to also the discussion around the role of cost. I hear very positive news on cost, but it's also a concern. But before we get, I want to close this opening, John, with you. We've heard from many energy leaders that are driving the decarbonization, and ExxonMobil, under the leadership of Darren Woods, has also been really focusing how do we pragmatically deliver the energy transition. So maybe to close this opening remarks, we started with systemic shifts from an Aramco perspective. Could you share your perspective of what is the key systemic shift needed in order to enable this decarbonization pathway?
And I agree that we do need systemic shift, and I'd say there's three of them I'd like to touch on this morning. The first is that we need to increase the cost of carbon. Carbon pricing is set by policy, it's set by carbon tax, it can be set by trading schemes, it can also be set by market demand. And governments can put in place subsidies. They certainly, such as we do in the United States with the Inflation Reduction Act, which has really helped to spur some of the initial low emissions investments, but those need to be temporary in nature. And what we see is that as the economy-wide affordability trends upwards and the cost of capture trends downwards, we need to see those policies shifting from project-enabling policies to market-forming enabling policies, because that's what gives us the certainty that we need to be able to invest for the long-term at scale and long-term deployment. So that's the first. The second is that we need to see a decrease in the cost of abatement. So right now, the cost to abate industry emissions is at quite the premium, relative to our incumbent unabated energy sources. And so any decarbonization effort is going to require significant breakthroughs and rapid breakthroughs in technologies. As one example, if we look at the cost of capture is 80% of the post-combustion value chain. That represents a significant prize and opportunity for us from a technology development and deployment perspective, and it's one certainly that ExxonMobil is pursuing quite aggressively. And then third is leveraging scale. This week is aptly named Progress at Scale. And so if we think about scale in terms of maybe the size of projects, the number of projects, or how far along each of us are participating in the decarbonization value chain, scale is what starts to unlock efficiency, learning rapidly, and the ability to continue to invest through the ups and downs of the energy cycle. But all three of these things are going to need to come together through collaboration. And collaboration with governments and the energy industry in terms of policy, in terms of technology, in terms of partnerships. And those will all have to come together if we're to get on the pathway we want to for our ambitions.
Fantastic, thank you. Not an easy task ahead of the industry. So let's delve into one component to drill down a bit deeper. So Omar, if I can get back to you, you highlight the role of electrification in your decarbonization strategy. Would you like to share a bit more detail in how electrification is not just being deployed, but how it also supports the emissions reduction? So very pragmatically, practically, how does that impact shape?
Sure. I think we are really blessed with the UAE government and especially the visionary leadership in the UAE by providing a UAE grid with powered by either mega solar projects or nuclear. And we have got access to that grid, and we have connected all of our onshore operation to that grid, thus allowing us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 60%, 8 years before our timelines. So it's really a privilege to do that. And this is one of the ways we have unlocked what I talked about earlier regarding Shah achieving point 1, because Shah, an oil field, especially very relatable to Baker, because it's mostly a depletion reservoir that only can be produced with ESP, which Baker supplies. And of course, we have also on the surface side, we have a compressor in order to transfer the associated gas to sour gas or our colleagues at ADNOC sour gas. So in order to overcome the availability of the compressor, we've been able to introduce a liquid ejector in order to allow recycling whenever there is an upset in our compressor, thus eliminating the need of any safety flaring even in Shah field. This is one of the innovative tools. One major also update regarding the electrification, we are expanding electrification to our offshore assets through Project Lightning in order to allow the expansion both for onshore and offshore to be powered through our grid. So there are multiple opportunities and a huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
Fantastic. And in your introductory remarks, electrification is one key pillar. You also touched upon the role of carbon storage, carbon capture and storage, which has been around for quite a few years. But it really also has a role to play, because in the end, in order to achieve this, there's a whole suite of solutions we need to deploy. So continuing on this technology and scalable technologies, could, John, turning briefly to you, what is the role of carbon capture and storage in this whole discussion?
Yep. I think for us, the whole carbon capture and sequestration is one that really leverages several of ExxonMobil advantages around technology, scale, and functional excellence. As you said, Renee, CCS is well known. It's well known to ExxonMobil as well. We have captured the most anthropogenic CO2 of any of the companies. It really helps to leverage knowledge in transportation, pipelines, wells, and reservoirs. And also the CCS helps us obviously decarbonize our own assets, but perhaps more importantly, help to decarbonize others. We have an entire series of projects that are fairly well advanced. The first two of those will be coming on here in the first half of 2025. So it's a significant pillar of our efforts. The second part is, on the CCS piece, is how it's helping enabling essentially carbon-free hydrogen. And so we're very well far advanced on the world's largest hydrogen plant with CCS on the back end. That is going to capture about 98% of the CO2 and will help us be able to take that hydrogen and use it for fuel switching, for ammonia, or perhaps even some cases of heavy transportation. And then on the third piece of that is around the low emission fuels. There too is CCS on the back end of that, and one of our first projects around that will be starting up here first half of this year as well, 40,000 barrels a day with ambitions, aggressive ambitions to get to 200,000 barrels a day by the end of the decade. But all three of these, whether it's the low emission fuels and hydrogen and then CCS as a whole, all three of those together, they're not about meeting targets. They're about creating viable businesses. Because if we can create the viable businesses, that is what's going to unlock and accelerate the pathway to net zero.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that was also, it's a good point you've raised. In Davos, there was a whole discussion around the economic model of decarbonization, but how do you translate that at a business level? So costs is not a given, and you already touched upon the need for a higher price of carbon, also to allow for that predictability. So Meg, we already briefly touched upon the role of cost, so maybe we'll delve into that, because in CCS that is also continuing a big question mark. But flipping it from a positive perspective, where are the opportunities for cost reductions you see?
First, I'll talk about the electrolyzers, because in the last 3 years, even of talking to this group at the annual meeting, we've seen a 50% cost reduction in electrolyzers, and that's been primarily driven by Chinese standardization of old alkaline technology. And so the next opportunity will be on reducing the footprint of the entire electrolyzer and hydrogen island. And that's going to come from bringing in new technologies, but I say new, they've been in development now for years. And so we see improvements on PEM technology, improvements on current intensity that are going to reduce the footprint and ultimately improve the efficiency of the electrolyzer. So I think we still have cost reduction opportunities on the electrolyzer and the hydrogen island. And then second is really on modularization. And for these low emission fuels, modularization is important not only on the hydrogen production, but also on the methanol synthesis. And so we're doing a lot of work to try to modularize both of those pieces, and expect in the next few months we can have some more modular designs that will reduce the cost. And then the third place is going to be on carbon capture and carbon capture technologies, which is why the work that Baker Hughes is doing on Mosaic is so super critical, that we reduce the cost of direct air capture. That is going to present the game changer in carbon capture and allow us to sort of control our own destiny of the projects and get away a little bit from the very dispersed capturing of post-combustion point source emissions. So that's the third place, will be really massively bringing down the cost of direct air capture from an efficiency standpoint and a massive production at assembly line process.
Thank you. So some key examples, and building on that, the cost is very much shaped by regulatory frameworks. So you already shared some of the components that help you to drive those costs down. There's a component of supply side. Guido, building on that, what does the industry need in order to deliver the decarbonization strategies that you're working towards? What is that enabling environment for you to succeed?
Yep. From policymakers, we need two things: clear regulatory framework and an unbiased approach to the technology, which is not exactly what happened in the European Union in the last few years, and we are living the effect of that. As a company, we need to focus on technology and also on funding our project. Because on one end, we need funds to build and grow the new energies, but at the same time, we need to maintain and grow the traditional, as the society is still demanding and would demand for the forthcoming years. And to address this dilemma without liquidating the traditional energy, we found some financial arrangement. We created special vehicles for the new energy and the traditional to access different pool of investors. The pool of investors of the renewable is different from the pool of investors of the traditional. And to have both of them in the same basket is not necessarily the right thing to do. So we have created what we've called satellite model, building different entities to access funds from different pools. On the technology, I want to mention two of them. One is the carbon sequestration, which was already mentioned before. We think is the best thing to do to provide a service and reduce the carbon footprint of the hard-to-abate industry. And second, to provide also blue electrons to the customers. And as E&I, we are building a leading position in Italy and UK with 3 projects. One of them just started in Italy. The second technology is the one on the biofuels. On the biofuels, we have a proprietary technology, very flexible, which allow us to work a wide array of slurries. But to make it more resilient and sustainable, we are also integrating it vertically in a very unique model, producing our feedstock from agriculture, from degraded land, not in contrast with food.
Fantastic. So real integration throughout the value chain on that as well. Continuing on the policy component and unpacking that a bit more. So policymakers need to balance multiple commitments and competing demands in some case, as do energy companies. So Fahad, maybe returning back to you as Aramco, Mr. Nasser has been really driving the discussion around an inclusive transition. On these competing demands, could you share a few words from an Aramco perspective, how that is being balanced in its own strategy?
Well, we have been evolving into identifying opportunities in our portfolio that supports this plan. And accordingly, we are moving into several aspects, one of which is we're exploring the minerals options. We're into a new JV with Ma'aden, the national mineral company in the kingdom, as we see opportunities of lithium products in our aquifer or formation water that comes with the oil. And accordingly, we are into that business that supports our renewable battery manufacturing of a very critical component, the lithium, debottlenecking it and improving its economy, which accordingly coming back to us into this affordability and energy economy as a stream of revenue back to our business. We're also moving and exploring moving into the business of blue hydrogen with the carbon sequestration and carbon storage that is moving, and within a couple of years we should be completing it with a capacity of 9 million tons of CO2 per annum. We're also looking at the whole ecosystem, and we're partnering into a very important business of steel. Steel plate. Our facility in oil and gas is a jungle of steel between vessels, pipes, platforms, and having to have this localization of this important aspects of business is part of our agenda. We are partnering with a Chinese company, Bao Steel, into building a steel factory in Ras Al Khair, in the kingdom, that is going to be structured with the lowest possible carbon emission. In fact, it's with a provision of hydrogen in the furnace that will make it almost negligible in terms of its carbon emission. We're also working with car manufacturers, partners of Mazda, Hyundai, Aston Martin, and global research centers all over the world, working into improving the efficiency of our engines and our fuel efficiency in general. That is beside our core business into our operation, which is focusing into technology, evolving technology all over the time, and accordingly we have been leading into our reservoir management, efficiency, surface facility efficiency, adoption of AI solutions into sustainability and lowering carbon emission, as well as maximizing reliability and efficiency, which is the cleanest energy you can think of because you're tapping into the unused energy into your business. For that, I think we have received recently the WIF Lighthouse recognition into capitalizing on AI solutions in Ghawar field, the biggest oil field in the world, which is our 5th recognition by WIF, following Upcake and Khays and others, indicating that hopefully we're moving in the right direction. The significant realization of our decarbonization plan is great.
Fantastic, and congratulations. Yes, the forum does lighthouse announcements on some of the manufacturing plans and production plans that are really outstanding, so congratulations. We're getting close to the end of the panel, and one name particularly has not been mentioned yet, but I think it's top of mind on everyone, at least it was in Davos. So allow me to briefly turn to current affairs, and of course the incoming US president and the discussion around energy and energy dominance. In that debate, Cederic, the role of LNG was mentioned many, many times, so I'm pretty sure the audience is actually keen to hear from you. So briefly pivoting to today's world and the new incoming US administration, how do you see the market for LNG evolve for the coming 2 years?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. 2 seconds just back on cost. I just want to stress that all the good examples that have been mentioned here are largely around the production. And I think still having that total ecosystem, including the infrastructure on the customer side. So if you produce more renewables, also investing in the grids and the challenges there. For example, around what it requires for customers to change out their infrastructure systems, whether it's city grid systems, whether it is marine customers, etc. So the type of product that MEG produces in terms of what it saves, in terms of not having to transition, all those kind of things, is something that I think is still underappreciated. Yeah. I'm not trying to dodge the Trump question, by the way. No, I think the new president coming in clearly has strong support for industry and for the energy sector in general, which I think we very much welcome, also as one of the largest foreign investors in the US. I think at the same time, as John also mentioned, at the same time we look for stability and predictability, right? And I can certainly say that the president's come in with a lot of energy in the last few weeks. If I was preparing my thoughts for this, we wouldn't have even had before the weekend, we wouldn't even have had the tariffs out there yet. I think a couple things. I mean, LNG, as you mentioned, around global stability is still, an energy source that is over 400 MTPA today, and we expect it to grow by more than 50% between now and 2040. And I think that is something that is becoming more and more a way that actually is connecting not only global gas markets, but global power markets as well, in the role that it plays in terms of shifting volumes to different places, and also being able to, basically provide those pricing inputs that then make products flow to different areas in the world, etc. 3 things maybe that have happened, with Trump relevant to this. I think one is clearly, the pause that was instituted. I think in reality, the pause would have been reversed in any new administration coming in, but now it's probably going to happen quicker. I think we have to be a little bit cautious about assuming that there is going to be a massive amount of FIDs next month, just because a number of the developers now have to put in together that whole package again, including the marketing, the customer, the offtake, financing, and everything else. The tariffs, I think that is going to clearly impact. I think my personal view always with this is in a globally connected system, such as the energy system, that tariffs in the long term always have an impact of actually making the market less efficient and more complex. So I think that's something that we'll now deal with. At the same time, I think the ingenuity in this room will have a lot of ideas on how to solve that. And then the last one is the ban on offshore drilling. We're the largest producer, and I'm going to sound a little bit, well, this is going to remind me of Prince when I say this. We are the largest producer in the Gulf of America, previously known as the Gulf of Mexico. And clearly what that's, that's also going to have an impact on, I think, both the oil and gas production in the US, what that then does for the local markets, export opportunities, gas into power in the US, et cetera, et cetera.
Fantastic. Yeah, Trump did bring immediate impacts, including on our knowledge of geography. So thank you for that. For our final 5 minutes, I'm actually going to tease the cast because I know they're super well prepared. We are at the beginning of the year, an exciting year for many of us for many reasons. So I would love to turn to hope. But I'm going to tease you to do it really in 30 snap seconds, in 2 sentences. What is your hope from a decarbonization point of view for 2025? And I'll go down by starting with John. What is your hope for 2025?
My hope would be is that we start to realize that economic development and energy use, they're inseparable. So wherever we have energy poverty, we're going to have poverty. Wherever we have rising energy availability, we're going to have rising standards of living. And I think that's really critical given the growth that we're going to see in energy demand. And so at the end of the day, as we think about it, what I would hope that we are going to start to see is that we recognize that the issue is really around greenhouse gas emissions in the context of global warming, not the fossil fuels themselves that, quite frankly, underpin every element of global economic activity. So we need to realize we need a world where all people have access to all types of energy, including oil and natural gas, that have significantly reduced or reversed emissions. That is our only pathway to reasonable pathway to achieving net zero. And so at the end of the day, we need to eliminate emissions, not energy, and that this should be the goal of a serious and thoughtful transition.
Thank you, John. Mac, your hope for 2025?
Well, clearly I'm hopeful that we see the IMO implement the regulation for the maritime sector, and I think that it will be really a global example of a major sector of the transportation industry that is keenly focused on margins and therefore is thoughtful about the value of CO2 reduction in the context of flexibility needed to continue having profitable businesses. And that we can take that example and make global standards for the aviation sector and even for road transport. And second, I would say that my hope for 2025 is that we really, really make progress on developing tools for carbon markets that allow us to value each ton of CO2 abated in the context of acceptance of mass balancing and carbon accounting that is standardized. So we have got to make progress on that this year.
Clear. I think ExxonMobil is also very much on that topic. Cederic, your one hope for 2025?
Two things, actually. Yeah, I know you asked for one. The most important thing still for industry to do in this decade is reducing methane emissions. So I'd hope for more action on that, and by all means, the worst thing that could happen is rolling back methane regulations and going back in that direction. So that's one. Two, and this may be a slightly unorthodox one coming from somebody like me, I'd actually like to see slightly lower LNG prices this year, because I think that is actually LNG still a critical role to play in the energy transition away from coal. And I think that will help a number of the customers in Asia continue to make that transition if we have what I would call more moderate rather than the elevated LNG prices we've seen recently.
Clear, very clear. Guido?
My message is more for some geographies than others, namely European Union, to shift from a more ideological approach to a more realistic and pragmatic one, and focusing on the right things, which are the technology, the innovation, and the diversification of the energy resources, which includes, of course, also the traditional one together with the new energies.
Clear. Omar, what's your hope?
It's not a hope, more of an observation. We are seeing very positive. I'm optimistic about the year 2025 because of the signals we're seeing that there is more pragmatic approach toward availing low cost, low carbon energy, but it's not only one type of energy, multiple of energy mix, and we believe that's the right approach to allow for growth, not only for the North, but also for the Global South. So these signals are very encouraging and makes us hopeful for the future.
Fantastic. Global South, Aramco, Fahad, what's your hope for the coming year?
Very well covered by my colleagues. I think if we to realize the pragmatic, realistic approach to decarbonization associated with equally affordability, the right energy economy, and the security of supply. If we to do so with the right enablers of collaboration of the whole community, name it companies, suppliers, consumers, countries, academia, research centers, we will achieve significant steps in our decarbonization footprint.
Fantastic. Steps at scale. That brings me to the end of this panel. A big thank you to the panel for joining us today, for all your insights. Some of the key words that stood out was realism, predictability, scale, and costs, of course, being reduced as we speak. So big thank you for all of you. All that remains is to wish you a fantastic time here in Florence. Big thank you to Baker Hughes and Lorenzo Simonelli for hosting us, and wish you a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.